Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions, where silence speaks louder than rage, and sometimes the softest goodbye leaves the deepest scar. There was a tiny crack under the bedroom door. That's all I stared at. Not the door itself. Not the light beneath it. Just that sliver where the wood had chipped. I must have stared at it for 3 hours while she laughed on the other side, FaceTiming someone she called just a friend. His name used to slip out in her sleep. No, I didn't barge in. I didn't knock. I just sat there like a fool, on the hallway carpet, knees up to my chest, holding a half-burnt letter I never gave her. You know what's worse than being lied to? Being irrelevant. It wasn't always like this. But I won't bore you with the fairy tale. This isn't about how we met, or our first kiss under Christmas lights, or the time she said I was her forever. That stuff makes it harder. This is about the moment I stopped being a husband and became background noise in my own home. Last Thursday, I tried to reconnect. I cleaned the house, lit a candle that smelled like vanilla and apologies. I even shaved, which, judging by her reaction, was about as impactful as fluffing a pillow before the earthquake hits. When she came home, I stood in the doorway between the living room and kitchen, her boots tracked in wet leaves. She was on her phone, laughing again. I asked gently, "Can we talk for a minute?" She didn't stop walking, didn't even pause to remove her scarf. "Not now," she said, eyes never leaving the screen. Just not now. That moment. That was it. Not dramatic, not explosive, but it was the loudest silence I'd ever heard. It said everything her lips were too comfortable to admit. That I didn't matter. That whatever she had elsewhere mattered more. And that I'd known it for a long time. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either. I just sat on the floor with that crack under the door like it was the last line in a story I didn't realize had ended. The next morning, she was brushing her teeth. Still humming. Still untouched by the silence between us. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I walked up behind her, met her eyes in the mirror, and whispered just one word: farewell. She didn't ask what it meant. That told me everything. I left the apartment with a duffel bag, a broken smile, and no plan. What happened after that? I wish it ended there. But the truth was still waiting, just not in the way I expected. I didn't go far that morning. Just sat in my car parked 2 blocks down, engine off, my bag tossed in the back seat like I was escaping something more than a woman. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe. It claws at your nerves. My fingers trembled on the steering wheel, not from cold, but from finally admitting it was over. Or so I thought. I don't know what pulled me back. Maybe it was cowardice. Or maybe I wasn't ready to let go without knowing the truth. Whatever it was, by noon, I was back at the apartment while she was at work. I still had my key. Still had a few things inside. My laptop, a box of letters I'd written her over the years and never had the guts to give. But I didn't go straight to my drawer. I went to hers. I don't even remember making the decision. One moment I was standing in the hallway. The next I was staring at her open laptop on the desk. No password. Just glowing, waiting. That should have told me everything. There was a folder on the desktop named Invoices. I clicked it. What greeted me wasn't spreadsheets. It was photos. Her. Him. Dozens of them. Parked cars, hotel lobbies, beach sunsets. Her in dresses I'd never seen. Him in clothes that still had the store tags. They were together in the city we were supposed to visit for our anniversary, the one she canceled last minute because she wasn't feeling well. I couldn't breathe. My chest locked up like a door someone had slammed shut behind me. I clicked through the images in a daze, barely noticing the timestamps that aligned perfectly with every conference, every girls' night. Every evening I sat on our couch alone, wondering what I did wrong. Then I found it, something worse than the photos. A video. It was only 10 seconds long. Taken by her. She was laughing into the camera, his arm draped around her. He said something I can't unhear. "So when are you finally leaving him?" She smirked, eyes twinkling in a way they never did for me anymore, and replied, "Soon. He barely notices when I'm gone." I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there on the edge of our shared bed, laptop on my knees, that line echoing in my skull like church bells before a funeral. He barely notices when I'm gone. That was her truth. And mine. I had noticed. Every time. I closed the laptop gently, like I was tucking in a sleeping monster. I left it exactly where it was, untouched, unspoken. Let her wonder if I ever saw it. Let her walk around with a question in her mind that I carried in my heart for months. I took my box of letters. I left everything else. By the time she got home, the apartment looked the same. Except for one thing. I left the ceramic turtle on the kitchen table with a sticky note stuck to its back. It read, "Now I get it." And I was gone. I spent the next 2 days in the cheapest motel I could find on the edge of town. The walls were stained, the air smelled like mildew and burnt coffee, and the mattress had more dips than a gravel road. But it was quiet. No laughter behind doors. No fake smiles. Just silence and the occasional knock from housekeeping that I never answered. I didn't eat much. Didn't sleep either. I kept replaying her words over and over. He barely notices when I'm gone. The thing is, I noticed everything. Every pause in conversation, every distant glance at dinner, every moment she looked more alive holding her phone than holding my hand. I just didn't want to believe what it all meant. But now I had the proof. And strangely, that made it easier to breathe. I told myself I wouldn't check my phone. But I did. 17 missed calls. Most were from her. A few from her sister. One from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer any of them. I wasn't ready to explain anything to anyone, especially not her. But then I got a text that wasn't meant for me. It was from that unknown number. It read, "He left. What now? You promised." There was no name, no context. Just that. And right then, something shifted. That wasn't just cheating. That was planning. That was a conversation I wasn't supposed to see. My mind started racing. Did she want me gone? Was she hoping I'd disappear quietly so they could move in together? Had she set the whole thing up? That message did something to me. I didn't want revenge. I wouldn't even know where to begin with that. But I wanted clarity. I needed to see how she would react. Not through her filtered stories or a fake apology. I wanted to see her unravel without knowing I was watching. So I did something I never imagined I'd have the nerve to do. I went back. But not as myself. I called in a favor from a guy I used to work with. He still monitored security systems around the city. I asked if he could set up a basic camera facing our apartment door. Nothing illegal. Just watching the hallway. I told him I suspected someone was breaking in. He didn't ask questions. Just said, "Give me 2 hours." While he handled that, I sat across the street in my car, wearing a hoodie and a baseball cap. I watched the building like a stranger. Like I'd never lived there. Like I didn't know what color the curtains were or how she liked her coffee burnt and sweet. Then I saw her. She walked out, dressed too nicely for a normal day, phone clutched in her hand, checking her reflection in a nearby window. She smiled as a black SUV pulled up. And then he stepped out. The man from the photos. From the video. They didn't kiss. They didn't even hug. But the look they shared, that look hit harder than any confession ever could. I wanted to believe she was just confused. That maybe she made a mistake and didn't know how to fix it. But the way she laughed with him, the way she glowed, I knew I was never part of that version of her life. Still, I didn't move. I let them leave. I let the silence follow. Because the next step wasn't rage. It was revelation. And I had one more move to make before I disappeared for good. I wasn't planning on talking to anyone. Not her. Not him. Definitely not her sister. But fate has a way of dragging you into conversations you never asked for. And this time, it came with a knock on the door of my motel room at 6:42 a.m. I didn't answer at first. I thought it was housekeeping again, or maybe someone who got the wrong room. But then I heard her voice. "Calvin, it's me. Please." It was Eloise, Marlene's younger sister, the one who always stayed out of things. She wasn't close to me, but she wasn't cold either. Mostly neutral. I never saw her take sides. But her being here? That made my skin crawl. If she knew where I was, then Marlene probably did too. I opened the door a crack, fully prepared to send her away. But what I saw stopped me. She looked awful. No makeup, red eyes, hoodie thrown over pajama pants, and clutching a crumpled envelope in one hand like it was the only thing holding her together. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. "She's lying to everyone, Cal. I didn't think it would go this far." I let her in. Not because I trusted her, but because something in her voice felt different. Shaky. Not like someone covering for her sister, but like someone trying to dig themselves out of the same collapsing hole. She sat on the edge of the motel bed and handed me the envelope. Inside was a printed email. From Marlene. Dated 4 months ago. The subject line read, "Subject, finalizing everything before the move." The message was short, cold, clinical. "Once he's out, we can go public. I just need him to walk away on his own. No mess. No drama. He's too passive to fight. Trust me. You don't know Calvin like I do." I read it 3 times. That last sentence stung more than the rest combined. He's too passive to fight. As if I was furniture. A ghost. A forgotten sweater in the back of a closet. Eloise didn't speak. She just let the words settle between us like dust on old furniture. How long have you known? I asked, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. She exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. I found that on her iPad 2 nights ago. I knew she was seeing someone, but I didn't know she was planning your exit. I looked out the window at the broken neon motel sign flickering in the morning fog. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a strategy, a plan. She hadn't fallen out of love. She had mapped out my removal like I was a stain on her life. Eloise stood and pulled out her phone. There's more, she said quietly. I recorded something. From last week. She doesn't know I was in the next room. She hit play. Marlene's voice crackled through the speaker, half laughing. He actually said farewell. Like it's a movie or something. I almost felt bad. Almost. But it's done now. I'll tell people he left for personal reasons. Nobody will question it. Silence. Then the man's voice. You're cold, babe. I love it. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The silence between me and Eloise was thick. She knew. I knew. And now there was no going back. You deserve to burn it all down, she whispered. Whatever that looks like. I shook my head. No, I'm not burning anything. I'm just making sure she never gets to write the ending. And with that, I knew exactly what I had to do. The thing about people like Marlene is that they don't just erase you. They replace you. Fast and loud. Like they're trying to drown out the echo of what they left behind. That became obvious when I found out she was throwing a moving forward party at our friend Layla's place. Not a birthday. Not a promotion. Just an excuse to celebrate her new chapter, as the Facebook event described it. Complete with balloons, champagne, and a guest list that somehow excluded the man she had spent 10 years of her life with. I wasn't invited, of course, but someone sent me the flyer anyway. No message, just a screenshot and a timestamp. At first, I stared at it like it was a joke. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized she wasn't just moving on. She was rewriting the entire story. And I was being edited out like a bad paragraph. So I made a decision. Not out of spite. Not even out of revenge. But because I finally understood something Eloise had whispered before she left my motel room. If you stay quiet, she'll get to define who you were. That haunted me. So I didn't plan some big scene. I didn't show up with anger. I showed up with the truth, and one very old, very ugly green duffel bag that held every piece of our life she didn't bother to take with her. Letters, cards, Polaroids, one torn concert ticket from a band she pretended to hate, the wedding vows she said she'd lost, and one photo of us holding hands outside the bookstore where we first met, both of us looking like we believed in forever. The party was loud. Music pulsed through the windows. People were already tipsy, laughing too loudly, drinking champagne like they were toasting some major victory. I waited until the perfect moment, right after the cake was cut and Layla gave a toast about new beginnings and letting go of the past. That's when I walked in. No one noticed me at first. Not until I set the duffel bag gently on the glass coffee table in the center of the room. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, if this is about starting fresh, I figured you might want the leftovers. All eyes turned. Conversation stopped. Marlene froze, mid-laugh, a plastic champagne flute in her hand, and a fake smile stuck to her face like it had forgotten how to move. She opened her mouth, probably to say my name in that sharp, embarrassed way people do when they realize they can't control the moment anymore. But I beat her to it. This, I said, unzipping the bag, is every piece of us you didn't bother to take. Thought I'd return it before the rewrite gets published. I pulled out the wedding vows first. Her handwriting on cream cardstock, still creased from being folded into her purse that day. Then a letter I wrote during our second year, telling her how I wanted kids, how I thought we were building something no storm could wash away. And finally, the video. I didn't play it. I just held up a flash drive and said, you might want to update your version of the story before someone else does. I left before she could speak, before anyone could decide whether to pity me or applaud me, because none of that mattered. What mattered was that for the first time, I didn't just walk away. I left a footprint. After the party, I vanished again. I didn't go back to the motel. I didn't go back to the apartment. I drove out to the old family cabin in the woods, the one no one visited anymore since my parents passed. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, just creaking floors and dust-covered furniture. I needed that silence, not the kind Marlene forced on me, but the kind I chose. I spent 3 days out there alone. I thought I was healing. I thought I was putting her behind me, like a storm that had already passed. But the truth? I was still living in the wreckage, too proud to admit I hadn't even begun cleaning it up. On the 4th day, I drove into town for supplies. I turned on my phone in the grocery store parking lot. 8 voicemails, 22 unread texts. I ignored them all until I saw a message from Eloise. We need to talk. It's about him. I didn't want to know more. I had already seen enough. But something about the wording, it wasn't vague. It wasn't about Marlene. It was about him. The man she left me for. The one in the video. The one who, according to her, was worth starting over for. So I called. Eloise picked up immediately. No small talk. No pretense. Just, I made a mistake. My stomach dropped. I thought he was just some new guy, she said. Someone she met through work. But I looked him up. And there's something off, Cal. He's not who he says he is. She told me his name. I already knew it. I'd seen it in her emails, on her contact list. But when I searched it myself that night on a barely working laptop using a shaky cabin internet connection, the first thing that popped up wasn't a social media profile or a company bio. It was a local news article from 4 years ago. Man implicated in corporate embezzlement scheme walks free after key evidence vanishes. Same name, same face. No criminal charges, but definitely not clean. There were rumors, internal audits, whispered accusations. And yet somehow, he had vanished from that world and reappeared in mine like a virus in a clean system. I sent the article to Eloise. She replied, "You don't understand. Marlene put your name on some of their documents. I saw it." And just like that, the ground dropped out beneath me. It was never just about betrayal. It was about setup. She hadn't just wanted me gone. She wanted me buried. Quietly. Completely. Like I never existed. Like she needed to delete her past, and I was the file in the trash bin she was ready to permanently erase. I stared at the walls of the cabin, every piece of old family memory suddenly tainted by the thought that my life wasn't just broken, it was being rewritten without my consent. I drove back into town that night. Not to fight, not to beg, but to make sure my name didn't end up on the wrong story. I always assumed the worst thing someone could do to you was stop loving you. I was wrong. The worst thing someone can do is make you doubt your own reality, make you question whether you were ever more than a placeholder in a story they were writing for someone else. That realization hit me hard the moment I stepped back into our old apartment. It was empty. Not furniture empty, emotionally empty. Cold. Still. The kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful, but abandoned. I walked room to room, trying to remember what it felt like to belong here. But all I saw were shadows. Ghosts of who we used to be, and I wasn't sure anymore if any of it had ever been real. I went straight to her desk. The laptop was gone, but the drawer wasn't locked. Inside, I found a plain USB drive. No label, no markings, just sitting there, like it had been left behind on purpose, or maybe forgotten in the rush to erase me. I plugged it into my own laptop back at the cabin. What I found made my hands go numb. There were folders, each one with a date. Inside, spreadsheets, contracts, PDFs with my name on them. My old email address was listed as a secondary contact. Several documents had electronic signatures, my signature. Only, I never signed them. I had never even seen them before. They were tied to some kind of shell company. Property transfers. Loans. The details were murky, but one thing was clear. Someone had used my identity. Not just casually. Not just to hide something. But to build something shady with my name as the paper trail. Buried in one of the files was a scanned letterhead from a law firm I'd never heard of. It mentioned a pending investigation. My name was circled. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. All this time, I thought I'd been walking away from heartbreak. In reality, I'd been walking straight into a setup. Then came the final gut punch. A folder labeled Exit Plan. Inside was a list. A timeline. Notes she had written, Marlene's notes. Planning when to emotionally distance. How to make me feel voluntarily detached, and when to introduce the idea that I had chosen to leave. There were lines like, stop sleeping in same bed mid-April. Ignore small talk, limit eye contact, May. Push him to make first move separation. Once gone, slowly bring in new partner. Normalize. It wasn't just betrayal. It was psychological surgery. She had designed my disappearance. I sat in the dark with that laptop on my knees, my breath shallow, my skin crawling like I'd just read my own obituary in her handwriting. I wasn't grieving a lost relationship anymore. I was uncovering a crime scene where the body was me. And that's when the phone buzzed. It was Eloise again. Just 2 words. She knows. I didn't need to ask what that meant. She knew I'd found the files. She knew I was still here. And if she was willing to fake documents, manipulate conversations, and rewrite a relationship, what else was she willing to do? I had one move left. Not revenge. Not escape. Proof. Because if she tried to bury me, I was going to dig my way up with the shovel of her own lies. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, but focus. I knew I couldn't go to the police yet. Not without context. Not without someone to back me up. But I had enough. Falsified documents, email threads, timeline notes, and now motive. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was premeditated character assassination. And I wasn't going to let her walk away clean. The next morning, I drove straight to the one person who still stood in my corner, Eloise. I handed her a copy of everything I found, all loaded onto a second flash drive. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded and said, "I'll get a lawyer. I'll help however I can." But I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a courtroom drama or a Netflix docuseries. I just wanted my life back. So I made a choice Marlene never expected. I went public. No drama, no hate, just truth. I wrote a letter. Simple, honest. I posted it to a community board we both used, the one where she was always the center of attention with her yoga classes and charity brunches. I titled it, "To Those Who Knew Us and Think They Know What Happened." I explained everything, not in a cruel way, just facts. What I discovered, what was done with my name, what I found in that hidden folder. I didn't blame her. I didn't attack her. I just told my side, the one she tried to erase. And the reaction? Overwhelming. Messages poured in. From old friends, from neighbors, even from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Not all of them believed every word, but they listened. They saw me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. And Marlene? She went quiet. Deleted her social accounts. Her new relationship, the one built on secrets, didn't survive the storm of sunlight. But I did. 2 months later, I found work in another town. I got a place of my own. Small, quiet, nothing fancy, but mine. I started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. And one evening, I opened a new notebook and wrote on the first page. He was never too quiet. She just wasn't listening. That notebook is almost full now. And for the first time, so am I. Thanks for being part of this journey on Reddit Confessions. If you've ever witnessed a shocking twist in real-life history, something hidden finally brought to light, share it in the comments below. Let's remind each other that truth may take time, but it always shows up. And don't forget to subscribe to Reddit Confessions, where every story is more than it seems.